Good morning and welcome to the Data Privacy Conference being hosted by the Office of the Information Commissioner in collaboration with the UE Data Protection Office and Privacy and Legal Management Consultants Limited. With this week being observed as Data Privacy Week, today's conference is being hosted under the theme, Navigating Privacy Challenges in a Connected World. I want to welcome those of you especially who are joining us live on YouTube at Office of the Information Commissioner and Jamaica Information Service, JIS. And also we're being televised live on JNN, so Jamaica News Network. So we're gone abroad, yeah? We can say that, right? So I would like to say that this event is for everyone. Everyone. With technology being a part of our day-to-day and in the way that we do business and the applications that we use on our phones, our information, like never before, is available for everyone to see, which makes it very important for us to protect our information. Our privacy is under increased threat and on a scale that we probably couldn't have imagined 20 years ago. So it is very important that this conference helps us to address the complexities of navigating privacy in this interconnected era, exploring the concerns and evolving dynamics that shape our interconnected society. Before we begin this journey, of course, let us invite the presence of God, which will be done by Public Education Officer here at the Office of the Information Commissioner, Khadija Bryan.
Please stand for the prayer. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for another opportunity to still be in the land of the living. We thank you for all the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us. And as we're about to begin this Data Privacy Conference, Lord, let everything that is shared be of value so that everyone understands the importance of data privacy in this connected world. Be with our speakers, be with our host, be with those who are watching online, and we pray that your blessings will rain down today on us. Thank you for your love and your mercies. Forgive us of all our sins. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us remain standing for the national anthem, which will be sung by Agape.
Eternal Father, bless our land. Guard us with thy mighty hand. Keep us free from evil powers. Be our light through countless hours. To all leaders, great defender, grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be ours forever. Jamaica land we love. Jamaica, Jamaica, Jamaica land we love. Teach us true respect for all. Stir response to duty's call. Strengthen us the weak to cherish. Give us vision lest we perish. Knowledge send us, Heavenly Father. Grant true wisdom from above. justice, truth be ours forever. Jamaica land we love. Jamaica, Jamaica, Jamaica land we love. We love.
You may be seated. Thank you so much, Agape, for raising our spirits with that amazing rendition of our national anthem. And can I say my favorite song as well? I didn't introduce myself. I'm talking to you, yet you don't know who's here on the mic. I am Janelle Powell, your host, your moderator for this very exciting program. And we are ready to get into the rest of it, but we have a few remarks that we want to hear. Very important people are going to come and speak to us. Propelled by the aim to see a privacy-conscious and empowered society in a digital world, the Office of the Information Commissioner has put on this conference. And to bring us greetings, to bring us remarks, we will have the Jamaica's first Information Commissioner, Miss Celia Barkley, who will bring us greetings.
Good morning and welcome everyone. Let me first of all thank you all for being here, and I would like to start, as much as I know we'll end, with a vote of thanks, with my own personal thanks to our stakeholders and partners for this event. In particular, and there's a reason I do it, I thank the University of the West Indies Data Protection Office for hosting us, as well as PLMC, who are patching in to this event to live stream it to increase our viewership. Now, I say that because we are here celebrating Data Privacy Day. The day will be on January 28th, on Sunday, and when we thought about what this office could do this year, firstly, we wanted to do something, and we wanted to do something impactful. But we wanted it to spotlight the topic. I'm not going to say the issue, but the topic of data privacy, because it's something that touches and concerns each and every single one of us. And so it has been in the news, in the media, everywhere, but certainly we wanted to ensure that at this critical time, all eyes and ears were here. And if ever there was a theme that would shine a light on exactly where we are and what our focus should be at this time, I think it's the one that was chosen. And I must thank and credit our Public Education Officer, Ms. Khadija Bryan, when she approached me with her proposal and said, Commissioner, I have a theme, and I think this is it. Navigating privacy challenges in an interconnected world. I didn't second guess it. I look at Jamaica and where we are, a relatively young country by all accounts, but very ambitious and always trying to keep a pace with everything else that our first world neighbors do. And I look at the monumental task that we have taken on in trying to pass and implement a Data Protection Act with our limited resources, because that's what we have, that's what we're working with. And so when we talk about challenges, there is absolutely no doubt that we are challenged. We're challenged individually, we're challenged collectively in our groups and our sectors, and we are certainly in many ways challenged as a nation. But when has challenges ever stopped us from trying? It never has. And so it's just a matter of how do you navigate those challenges? But in doing so, and especially if you're doing it in the field of privacy, you have to think about that interconnected nature of people, of organizations, of countries, of the entire world. We don't stand separate and apart anymore. We are in a time that is moving fast. We're in a world where the gaps are closing rapidly. Everybody has or can find information about everybody else. And so the question is, who are you? And do you have full control of your very being, your identity, the personal information that makes you who you are, when it can be passed at the click of a button from one device to another? Not to the person next to you, but to the person hundreds of thousands of miles away across the globe. Can we be any more connected than that? And in that kind of world, how can we possibly protect ourselves? It's a challenge. It is a challenge. But it's a challenge that we have embraced. We have not been daunted by. I have a team of young, vibrant persons who, like this country and like many of you watching, data protection is fairly new to them as well. The office itself is new. But they have not been daunted by the challenge. They have worked diligently and hard in trying to bring the office to where it is, and even in trying to put together this very function that we're at today. And I say this to say that it is a testament to what collective effort can do. It is a testament to what can be achieved by commitment, by dedication, by looking at challenges and not fearing them, but recognizing that with the right mentality, with the right approach, even with limited resources, you can achieve your objective. Interconnectivity is not just a threat. It is not just a risk to you as a person when you think about your data privacy. Interconnectivity is also a tool, a strategy for mitigating those risks, because it is through our own connections, as is represented here by the stakeholders that we share this event with, that have partnered with us over the past 2 years and that continue to partner with us. It is from those bonds, those linkages, those sharing of resources that we were able to get here today. And so I say this to say, today we simply gather to recognize the importance of data privacy, to recognize the impact of data protection laws on each and every one of us and on our country, but also to recognize that as we face the challenges, whether as data subjects in exercising our rights or as data controllers in trying to comply with this law that requires so much of us, or even as the service providers, the training providers who are helping to prepare persons to assist others with their compliance journey, that it is only through building and leaning on those connections, the public-private partnerships, other collaborations, that we will all be able to benefit from this regime as is intended. So I close by saying we have put together a program that I hope will allow persons to just open their minds to what is possible, what is intended with this legislation, but at the same time to allow persons to recognize that it can be done, it will be done, and we will do it together. And we hope as we go through that we will lighten the mood somewhat with a bit of entertainment for all of you. Because at the end of the day, we have our burdens, but we bear them with a smile, and we move on to accomplish big things if we simply persevere. I thank you all for coming and hope that you enjoy the presentations of our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you again, Commissioner, for those remarks. I will now invite the Chief Technical Director of the Information and Communications Technology Division at the Office of the Prime Minister, Ms. Joaquin Murray, to bring us greetings on behalf of Senator the Honorable Dr. Dana Morris Dixon, Minister with responsibility for skills and digital transformation in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Good morning, everyone. Let me extend apologies on behalf of Minister Dixon, who unfortunately was not able to be here. So to our host, Ms. Powell, to our Information Commissioner, Ms. Celia Barkley, Chairman of the Data Protection Oversight Committee, Mr. Christopher Record, esteemed speakers and presenters we'll hear from a little later today, Ms. Anglin, Dr. Anglin rather, Ms. Collins and Mr. Cameron, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning. I would like to start by acknowledging and thanking the Office of the Information Commissioner, the OIC, for organizing this conference, as I know it is not easy for a new entity such as it to take on these onerous events to engage with the public and key stakeholders. To add to that, the OIC is currently in the real genesis of implementing the Data Protection Act, a new and significant piece of legislation. My hat goes off to the Information Commissioner, Ms. Celia Barkley, and her team. The march of history is moving towards connectedness, and we are spending an even more astronomical amount of time online with each other. The connectivity has paved the way for unprecedented convenience and efficiency, but at the same time, it casts a truly dark shadow on privacy. In this state of connectedness, how do we maintain personal privacy? How do we maintain data privacy? I know we have our technical terms, and it is a technical jargon, and sometimes in that context can be devoid of true-to-life impact. However, data privacy is more than a technical term, and data privacy is about the respect and dignity of every individual. Each byte of data represents a part of someone's life, their choices, their preferences, their secrets, and their identity. When this data is not safeguarded and treated with sanctity, it is not just numbers and facts that are compromised, but the very essence of a person's human dignity and freedom. We live in a world where our movements, our communications, and even our thoughts, when typed into a search engine, are recorded, analyzed, and often monetized, and where the boundaries between public and private life are increasingly blurred. This constant connectivity, while beneficial in many ways, pose significant risks to our personal privacy and security. The unbridled collection and use of personal data has created a surveillance economy of sorts, where the lack of transparency and consent poses a grave risk to individual autonomy and privacy and collective cohesion. The crux of the issue lies in the vast amounts of data that we generate daily and how this data is used, often without or explicit consent. Data has become, as we know, the new oil, but like the old oil, only some companies with the necessary infrastructure could extract and refine it to attain its true value. Our personal information has become a commodity, traded and monetized in the digital marketplace. This commodification of personal data not only threatens our privacy, but also our autonomy, freedom, and prosperity. The implications of data breaches and misuse are not just about identity theft, financial loss, or misuse of information. They reach deeper, affecting our trust in our national digital systems, or freedom of expression and our right to privacy. But ladies and gentlemen, it is not all gloom and doom. We stand at a crossroad where meaningful action can make a difference. On an individual level, we must become more aware and educated about our digital footprints. For instance, it is crucial to understand the privacy settings of the platforms we use and to be mindful of the information we share online. Vigilance and awareness are our first lines of defense in protecting our personal data. Consequently, we must be mindful about automatically clicking accept cookies on a website or wantonly granting permission to apps we download. We must scrutinize every request and not be afraid to rescind our consent once given. The private sector has a role to play too. Businesses and organizations must also embrace a culture of privacy, seeing it not as a compliance requirement, but as a cornerstone of customer trust and corporate responsibility. Ethical data handling should be the norm, not the exception. It is no secret we are all navigating the waters of data privacy. Though we may be in different boats, we are all on the same sea. The sea of data privacy is daunting, with many guidelines and standards, some would say. As policymakers, we decided to be proactive to reduce unnecessary uncertainty and guide best outcomes. In this regard, the Data Protection Act was designed to protect a person's dignity and to put our people back in control of their data and the online wealth that is created from it. The Data Protection Act is a compass that will help us as individuals, as businesses, and as a nation to navigate this journey of respect. The administration took the policy decision to put this tool in the hands of every citizen because as we build our digital Jamaica, we must ensure all Jamaicans can find their place. Remember, technology is not the adversary here. When used responsibly, it has the power to enrich our private and public lives in countless ways, from the national broadband providing stable, low-cost internet, to your coming digital ID that reduces the hassle of providing your identity. The challenge, therefore, is to strike a balance to leverage the benefits of this connected world while safeguarding our privacy and dignity. The Office of the Information Commissioner, as it is being operationalized, stands ready to maintain that equilibrium. This state must be actively maintained because as we speak, the emergence of technologies such as artificial intelligence threatens this stability. Nonetheless, I'm confident that the Information Commissioner and her team will rise to the occasion. In conclusion, the protection of data privacy is a collective responsibility, a pact between individuals, the private sector, and governments. Let us commit to this pact and build a future where technology serves us without compromising our privacy and freedom. Thank you, and may you have a wonderful and productive conference.
Thank you both. Ms. Murray and Commissioner Barkley spoke to online behaviors that we all exhibit, because I will admit I have accepted several cookies, and I have skipped the terms and conditions and privacy measures that these apps say that they have. Have I suffered from it? Thankfully, not yet. So, while they were open about the very real risks that these behaviors pose, they were very honest and very comforting in that we have a certain power that we can exhibit in making sure that our information is safe, our information is kept private. And we're going to now go into the nitty-gritty of navigating privacy challenges in a connected world. So I want you to picture this with me. Let's say that your organization wants to expand its reach to the diaspora. Having started the process, you encounter the intricate web of data protection regulations in the various countries, and how do you even wrap your head around all of these requirements? Well, our first speaker, Dr. Patrick Anglin, is the first of our 3 presenters who will be sharing valuable information that I will be taking furious notes of and listening eagerly. He is the University Data Protection Officer at the University of the West Indies, who will unravel the practical strategies to help us navigate the complex terrain of data protection compliance with finesse and precision. Dr. Anglin is a distinguished graduate of the University of Manchester's Manchester Business School, where he earned his Doctor of Business Administration, DBA, with an MBA from the Mona School of Business and Management, University of the West Indies. Also, a BSc in computer studies, rather. He spearheads ICT policy and projects across UWI campuses. He is the owner of a consulting firm. He's an associate at the UWI Consultancy Company. Notably, he contributes to the Distance Education Standards Committee and the Technical Working Group of JREN, showcasing his impactful presence in education and technology. And as I'm reading this, I am 100% assured that he knows what he's talking about. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Patrick Anglin as he presents on the topic, Overcoming Challenges for Data Protection Compliance within related organizations and across jurisdictions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Powell. Good morning, everyone. And I just want to, before I begin, just to thank the Office of the Information Commissioner for the invitation to partner in this most needed conference at this time. The protocols have been already observed by Ms. Morris. I just want to say morning to everyone. And I thank again Ms. Powell for setting me up in the way she has by indicating that I'm going to be speaking with finesse. But I don't have a speech prepared, but I do have some PowerPoint slides. I want you to walk with me as I navigate them for the next 20 minutes or so. And I'll be focusing on the issue from the perspective of a fairly large organization, which is the University of the West Indies. Now, the lessons that we have learned really can be used by any organization. So let me give you some background. The University of the West Indies, as many of you know, has been around for the last 75 years. We operate, as many persons didn't know, across 26 different jurisdictions globally. 16 of these jurisdictions are in the Caribbean. 10 are outside. So we are a truly global institution. And our presence, our footprint is fairly large across the world. So therefore, we had to take special care in what we were doing in respect of data protection, privacy, and the respect for information, for personal information that Ms. Murray would have spoken about. But to set the context, we are in a connected world, and the theme speaks to navigating the challenges of this connected world in which we find ourselves. Now, the world that we find ourselves engenders quite a bit of cross-border commerce. We need to conduct business across borders. In fact, according to the World Economic Forum, in last year's meeting, not the one which just took place, it is estimated that over the last 10 years, up to last year, the trade which took place via electronic commerce was estimated at $2.7 trillion US. That's quite a bit of money. And today, nearly 2/3 of commerce is related to digital technology. Now, that is nothing to scoff at. We are recognizing that technology is not only a facilitator, but it's also a driver. But I want us to pay attention because data protection is not only relegated to to digital technologies. It also encompasses the normal things that we do. When we entered this room, we would have given our names to the registrar outside who was registering individuals who were coming in. That is personal data that we just passed. Now, that is something that has to be protected outside of the digital space. And it's something that we have to start thinking about. In addition, though, McKinsey Global, and that's a large consulting firm, they have said that in addition to commerce, we're talking about flows which represent knowledge, know-how, intellectual property, and yes, data, personal data. These grew by more than 40% per year over the last 10 years up to last year. So there is exponential growth in the flow of information and how this information is going to be used or is being used across the world. So that is some context for you. Further, going back to the World Economic Forum, there is a basic dilemma here. What is that dilemma? The dilemma is not only about you placing your personal data in the various applications that you interact with in cyberspace, not only about you doing trade online, but it's also about governments. It's also about governments protecting their citizens. And this protection involves regulation. But you see, regulating how data is used within the local jurisdiction is really challenging enough. Governments now have to regulate cross-border transfers, which is a part of the dilemma. This is what the world looks like now. If you can see the slide, the areas in red represent what the world looks like in terms of privacy legislation. There is no place that we can trade without encountering this kind of rule, these kinds of rules. And yes, we are in red too as a Jamaican society. You will recognize something. Many of the states that are not in red tend to be those states which very few countries want to do business with. So, as an organization which wants to do business across the world, even regionally, we have to start to pay attention to what the various rule sets look like, the various legislations look like. And in fact, the legal persons, the legal minds amongst us will say that we have to now delve into each of these jurisdictions and look at their sets of rules. But I want to take a fairly different approach. But before I delve into my approach, you or your company might not be trading across the region. You might not be trading across the world. Your trade may be restricted to a single branch in a single parish or multiple branches across different parishes in the same country, Jamaica. So you recognize that while we speak about a global picture, you have some specific problems that you have to deal with, perhaps as a small or medium-sized enterprise. But you have to worry about other things. Within your context, information flows between stakeholders, even within your company. Information flows between stakeholders who are outside of your company and your company itself. The ideas I'm going to share with you are not restricted to large organizations, to large multinationals. They're not. They can be used in other organizations which are even smaller. So, while the commissioner and the lawyers amongst us will focus on compliance with the law, allow me to take a broader approach. And that approach starts from embedding privacy as a part of the DNA of the organization. It must be a part of the operating philosophy of your organization. And how do you get it to be a part of the operating philosophy? Of course, compliance has to be done. You have to comply with the law. There's no question about that. But philosophically, compliance becomes a positive side effect of good practice. So let's start with looking at the fair information privacy practices, which, based on our reading of the legislation, form the basis of the legislations we've seen across not only the region, but across the world. These fair information practice principles or privacy practices, the FIPS, came out of the OECD in 1980. And they form the basis for embedding privacy in any organization, wherever you are. The first principle speaks to collection limitation. And the lawyers amongst us will recognize that the principles of the FIPS, the Fair Information Practice Principles, are replicated in our own legislation. The wording may be a little different. So, to organizations, I say, don't start with the legislation. Start by embedding the principles. And what you're going to find is that compliance with the legislation becomes automatic. The first principle indicates that you should limit collection of personal data to only what is necessary. Make sense? You limit the collection of personal data to only what you need. Now, the legal team will tell you that, of course, you can still collect outside of that once you get consent. So that still holds. The next principle is in relation to data quality. And again, let me repeat, the principles that I'm outlining here are replicated in all the legislation that we have seen. Data quality principle indicates that the information, the personal data, and when I say personal data, I'm referring to any information which either by itself or combined with other information which is in the possession of the company, the data controller, or likely to come into the possession of the data controller, which can be used to identify an individual. And that individual is either alive now or might have died less than 30 years at the point of identification. So that is the definition that we're working with in terms of personal data. And the data controller is the company who determines how information is processed. And of course, the processor is perhaps a subcontractor who takes directives from a controller. So we have the working definitions out of the way. The quality principle indicates that the organization must ensure that the information that is collected not only is limited to what is necessary, but is accurate to represent the individual. The third principle, and I'm going to go quickly because the time is short, purpose specification. What does this mean? It means that you have to indicate to the data subject, which is the person whose information you have, that you are collecting for a particular purpose. But not only do you have to indicate that, you now have to do what you said you would have done. So if you say you're going to collect it for X purpose, you can't change, of course, without informing the individual. Respect again. The fourth is similar to purpose specification. It is now use limitation. And you really have to limit how the information is used once collected. The fifth, and there are 8 principles. The fifth one, security safeguards. That is when the organization puts in place proper security mechanisms, be these technology solutions or operational measures, business process measures, to safeguard the information it has. So many persons, when we speak about data protection, they expect us to be talking about information security only. The CIA triad that the information security persons speak about. But it's a lot more than that. The sixth principle is that of openness. Now, the openness principle speaks to the organization and its own stance. How does it view you, the data subject? Does it recognize that you have some rights? And that's where the openness principle comes in. The law will specify several rights of a data subject. But this principle goes far beyond that. It subsumes these rights. And it says, our organization represents an accountable organization who respects your rights. And whatever those rights are, as enshrined in the law, we tend to go a little further than that. We say, listen, you have not only a right to access the information, but we must ensure that the access is easy. We must try to ensure that we don't put roadblocks in your way. And this is important because this particular principle is what allows us to have good relationships with our data subjects, with our customers. The seventh principle, and I've put it in red, this is the individual participation principle. And this principle is when the data subject will come and make requests of the organization. Data subjects have a right through openness to access their information. Does the organization engender individual participation by putting mechanisms in place for data subjects to exercise the rights that they have? The final principle is that of accountability. The organization is accountable not only to internal stakeholders, but to government, but to customers. And not only to government, to customers, but also to the wider society. And in order to ensure that this accountability is observed, the organization must act in a manner which is transparent. It must act in a manner which ensures that persons are comfortable. And when we speak about privacy, many organizations, especially the ones that we have been talking to, they complain about privacy being a cost driver. They're saying that, listen, all this act is doing is driving up costs. I see heads shaking. That's all it's doing. But guess what? It can actually be a competitive driver too. If you can ensure that your customers are comfortable with them passing their information to you, then that is a competitive lever that you can use, not only in the narrow Jamaican space, but because the global landscape is as it is, we have to be competing in that space as well. And the truth of the matter is that the companies outside of Jamaica are using data protection and privacy as competitive levers, and we must compete with them because the customers are expecting us to compete and to have the same set of standards. Now, our law enshrines some things in respect of accountability, and one of them speaks to international transfers. That's a part of our accountability. We have to ensure that when we transfer information to anywhere, that the protection of the information that we would put in place is also put in place by the other entity. So I have not gone into the law itself. You recognize that I am sticking with the principles. And my argument is that once you embed these principles in the organization and its operating philosophy, then it's automatic, or almost automatic, that you comply with the law. Now, some examples of some of the issues and possible solutions that organizations are now facing and that what they will face. One of the biggest challenges is knowing how the organization operates. And it's fairly straightforward that you expect somebody to understand how their company operates, even the one that they own as a small business operator, right? But it's not always the case. It takes a lot of work to understand the various business processes throughout an organization. And this is critical in recognizing how to embed privacy as a part of the operations, because if you don't understand the operations, you can't embed privacy in it. What's the solution? You have to engage the people who actually do the work. And I smile when I say that, because many of the people with whom we have interacted are the decision makers. They don't do the actual work. They do other work. And you have to get down to the base of the organization and speak to the persons who are interfacing with the customer. Understand how they do what they do. Don't just look at the standard operating procedures. Understand how persons do what they do. Another example is addressing resistance to change. That's a big one, because we've done it this way all the time. Using my organization, we've done it this way for 75 years. We believe we're bright people. We know what we're doing. So who are you to come and tell us that what we're doing is wrong? And it happens all the time. How do you address resistance to change? And it's natural. You must engage some sort of change management process, even if it's informal. This change management process must be done at the very outset, you know. Because if you don't do it at the outset, you're going to find that you have gone down the wicket and you have sunk resources and you're not able to reap the benefits that these resources are supposed to be reaping. So the solution: go slow and engage the everyday worker. In fact, use the carrot first. Second, third, fourth, fifth. The stick should only come out if you're desperate. So you need to engage some privacy champions. Try not to quote, at least at the outset, the penalties section of the legislation. We like to quote that, you know, the 5 years in the parish court, you can be imprisoned and $5 million, and the lawyers like to quote that. Or in the Supreme Court, it can go up to 10 years or 4% of your annual global turn. Stay away from that. The carrot, it works better. Accountability. If it's not measured, it's not done. If somebody is not held accountable, it won't happen. But how do you put accountability in place? you have to get the governance right early. What do we mean by governance? Your privacy management program, and you must have one. Your privacy management program must sit at almost the top of the organization. Because what you need is you need buy-in from the top first. And that is where the governance comes in. Who is going to be overseeing your program? Is it going to be a board committee? Is it going to be the CIO? Is it going to be the DPO? I'm not making recommendations. I'm just asking the questions. But in addition to recognizing the governance, who is driving the program? Who is the individual who everybody can point to and say, that's the czar, that's the privacy man around the place? That person is the driver. To do that, you have to appoint a leader for the entire process. We haven't started with the law part yet, you know. We're just looking at the organization. And perhaps my colleague presenters will deal with the law better than I. Or there's no perhaps. They will deal with the law better than I. But I want us to look at the organization because that is where the rubber hits the road. So compliance is a separate matter. And that's a very hard slide to see. So I'm going to just use one example. Remember I spoke about the principles, eh? The principles? What are the principles? It's the fair information practice principles or the fair information privacy practices. This is where the analogy comes in with the law. In our legislation, there is a first principle. And the first principle says that personal data must be processed fairly and lawfully. Making sense? That principle is tied to our FIPS principle. So let's look at how we comply with this principle. One of the first things we have to do is, in ensuring compliance with this principle, we have to ensure that we understand what we mean by fair processing. What does fair processing mean in an organization? It means that we must explain to the data subject, the individual, the purposes for which data are being collected, how long it's going to be retained, and who it's going to be shared with, and the rights of the individual. Do you recognize that these are what we spoke about earlier in the FIPS? You recognize that? So once you have put the practices in place, you can comply with this particular standard, and there are 8 standards in our law. Lawful processing, what does that mean? It means if there is no lawful basis, then processing cannot take place. Now, there are some exceptions to this. Consent is one exception. And we're not going to go into the rest of the exceptions. Compliance. For fair processing, very, very simple. Do we have privacy statements around our notices to our data subjects? What are these? So for example, let me give you an example. At the university, we have 4 of these statements. We have a general statement to tell the general public how we process their information. We also have one for our current students, one for staff, and the one for staff is very dynamic. It's ever-changing. And then we have another one for alumni. This is how we embed this particular compliance mechanism. But in addition, records retention. we have a set of records retention policies. In fact, before this, we have an archives and records management program which deals with how it is we manage records from entry or from creation to disposition. It's important. I'm going to finish. Lawful processing. Again, this speaks to the consent forms necessary. We have to look at existing contracts between us and other entities. And if none exist, we have to put them in place. We have to also look at our own legal obligations. So I'm going to stop now, because I think my time is up, and summarize. The first thing that we have to start thinking about and understand, we have to recognize this is not the GOJ making your life more difficult. You saw the map that I showed. This is what is happening across the world. In fact, the UN system has 193 member states. Of that, 158 of them have legislation in place. 193 countries. Of that, 158 have legislation. So it's not about us making things difficult for the Jamaican businessman or for the Jamaican school or for the Jamaican company. We have to look at our organizations in terms of operations, in terms of its culture, and embed privacy in the culture. The principles come first. And I'm going to say this very, 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 very softly. Compliance is the last thing. I end there, and thank you.
To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And the world will be better for this, that one man, scorned and covered in scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable star.
A bigger round of applause. That was beautiful. So far, we have been given a lot of questions to answer and solutions to mull over as we seek to put privacy into practice as encouraged by Dr. Patrick Anglin. Thank you so much for an illuminating presentation. So in a similar way that we started Data Privacy Week with God, Data Privacy Week started on Sunday with God as well, with a church service at the Kingston Open Bible Church. And we have been involved in a number of activities since then. On Monday, there was an interview with Radio Jamaica 94 FM, RGR FM as we know it, called the Service Excellence Corner. I hope we would have tuned in. I see one vigorous nod over there. Yes, man, I was tuned in. Then on Tuesday, we had our TVJ Smile Jamaica interview. I was tuning in and I was able to catch a few snippets. And we are here today at the Data Privacy Conference. On Sunday, January 28th, you have Data Privacy Day to look forward to. And when you take up a copy of the Jamaica Observer and the Gleaner, you will be treated to a feature article in that newspaper. And finally, to wrap everything up, on Monday, January 29, there will be an interview on Nationwide 90 FM on the Service Excellence Hub at 11 a.m. All right? 11 a.m., mark it in your calendars. So we can all agree that embracing technological advancements has made our daily tasks easier. With a few taps, we're able to see whether our salaries have been posted, and I know at 6 o'clock this morning, many of us checked our bank accounts. I think it's a well-needed way to wrap up the 100 days of January. So a single email is now available to serve as the gateway to multiple apps and platforms, yet amidst this interconnectivity, we find ourselves wondering what the potential risks that accompany these inconveniences are. So it's time for us to delve into this crucial aspect of the program with our second presenter, Justine Collins. She is an attorney at law and privacy specialist at Hart Muirhead Fatta. Justine Collins is a partner at Hart Muirhead Fatta, and she brings a wealth of legal expertise to the table. A qualified attorney called to the bar in 2016, she focuses on commercial and corporate law with a keen interest in cutting-edge fields such as technology, financial technology, blockchain applications. So you know, I'm not familiar with the term. Data protection and electronic commerce law. She holds certifications as a certified information privacy professional, CIPP/E, yeah? And certified information privacy manager, CIPM. She is committed to staying at the forefront of legal and technological advancements, which I think is only appropriate because as technology advances, so should the law that we have to protect our information. She's a proud alma mater, alumna of Queen Mary University of London. She continues to navigate and contribute to the dynamic intersection of law and innovation. Please welcome her as I call her to the podium as she unravels the complexities of managing the risks of interconnectivity and future technological developments.
Good morning, everybody. Chairman, Information Commissioner, invited speakers, my esteemed panel. Thank you very much for inviting me, Ms. Barclay. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm very happy to be here on such an exciting topic. Just waiting for my slides to come up. Okay, great. So, managing the risks of interconnectivity and future technological developments. And when I got this topic, I don't know about you, but I had to Google it. I had to Google what interconnectivity was because I was like, what is this? What do we really mean by this? I'm a simple girl. And so I looked it up and I said, interconnectivity, what are we talking about? And I said, let's start with the basics. This is something that was in a lot of people's homes about 40 years ago, a rotary telephone. Anybody recognizes this? No? No? Yes? I'm familiar with it. I've seen it on television. So I'm not as young as I look, but yes, I'm familiar with it. So this to me is what we're looking at in terms of connectivity. As simple as just picking up that analog telephone and rolling the rotary round and round and round to get to 9 and get to 8. We are looking at how we connect people together, right? Connections. And taking up the phone, I mean, it's a little different now. Our phones look like this, right? And we're able to speak to people far across the world a little bit easier. But certainly when we're thinking about connectivity, we're talking about people collaborating. So when I did some research, I said interconnectivity is really lots of people collaborating with one another over a thoroughly meshed network, right? So when we talk about connectivity, and we've heard a lot about it today, the click of a button nowadays with the World Wide Web and with the internet, we are increasingly interconnected. So everything and everyone is connected. And certainly we're here in person, but we are also live on YouTube and JNN. So we are interconnected. We're able to communicate wide abroad. I'm sure people from the diaspora are tuning in as well. So certainly we do have that meshing and interconnection. So seamlessly and without any kind of buffers, we're happening in real time and we're able to communicate. So what are some of the implications? Because I know we had this wonderful musical selection about the unreachable star, and you know, that was my graduation song for prep school, The Impossible Dream. But I don't think data privacy is an impossible dream, right? Right, Ms. Barkley? It certainly is reachable, but we will all get there together. And so when we're talking about interconnectivity, there are benefits, there are implications. So improved efficiencies, we heard about how data privacy and interconnection can be a strategy. So we're able to, instead of having all of these charges taking up the rotary telephone and calling, we can send a little email, click of a button, or we can send a WhatsApp. It's definitely more cost efficient. There's a lot of efficiencies there. And then we have wider access to more providers for different things. So you're able to, because you're able to collaborate with more people across the world, you have increased third-party providers. And I want you to pay keen attention to the third-party providers aspect of it, because we're going to look into vendors and some of the implications of that. So you're able to connect with, I work with a lot of persons who are using software providers or developers from India. And certainly years ago, it might have been a little hard to even communicate with people so far away. Increased data sharing. And we touched on it a little bit today already when we talk about transfers and even just sharing within an organization. So when we're talking about information moving seamlessly across an organization, sending an email outside of your organization, how are we dealing with our data? And the government is doing a lot of work with their open data policy. I was in a session where the Honorable Minister was there, and she was talking about all of the things that we're doing with digital transformation, which I know Chuck will be speaking about later. So you'll hear all of the excitement with that. But certainly there's a movement to have more accessible information and sharing across government entities. You certainly don't want to be going to one entity and this agency and that agency and just everything sort of disparate. And then finally, as Ms. Murray had touched on earlier today, there's the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, which I will go into a bit more today. So artificial intelligence, of course, it really signifies how the computers or large language models can mimic human intelligence. So they're able to draw from large data all across the internet, especially with regards to generative AI, and produce solutions or produce content in a sense. So AI has been around for a very long time, but we're seeing a lot of activity in that space now. And it is something that can be helpful for us, but then there are data privacy risks, which I'm really going to be focusing on for a lot of this presentation. So as we navigate this interconnected world where at the click of a button, information can be shared and, you know, everything can be uploaded, how are we dealing with it from a data privacy perspective? What are the risks? I don't like to talk about risks to start off. I like to start off with the benefits. But yes, there are some risks that we have to think about. So data breaches, your vendors, your third parties. So very, very important. As we're able to connect with a large amount of third-party providers, we're able to get this really inexpensive provider out of India, or, you know, compared to some of the providers we're seeing in the States, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is great. But then you start seeing, okay, we're going to be sharing, we're giving access to providers across the world, our personal data in our systems, our customers' data, and our employees' data. So we have to be mindful about possible data breaches. You don't want to be in a situation where you have a software provider or you have a third party and there's a breach and you hear about it 6 months later. And it's something that's very, very real, because you as a controller company, you have certain obligations, 72 hours, right, to report any kind of data breach. So you want to be in a position where you are aware of what's happening. You're doing your due diligence and you say, okay, no, we're looking at them and we're doing an audit of, we're just testing everything to make sure we are satisfied and we feel comfortable. And certainly your contracts will reflect that. And then data persistence, very important in terms of what is it that we're keeping? What are we retaining, right? Data repurposing as well, when we're talking about AI especially, where they're being used for different purposes. Dr. Anglin would have spoke about just the fact that we, in terms of the principles, using it for one or more specified purpose, that is one of the standards that we have to be mindful of. And when we're implementing these principles, are we using it for one purpose and then later on it's used for another purpose? Certainly as we're integrating more technology into our organizations, we need to think about that. Data leakages, sort of linked to the data breaches, when there's a situation where data might be leaked to somebody else or there's some sort of issue there, you have to be mindful. And then, of course, keeping the data accurate. So there are certain data privacy risks that present. So we're going to also look at specifically some of the standards under the Data Protection Act and the rights that might be influenced by these new technology and their developments. So let's just dive in here. I know that Dr. Anglin spoke a little bit about these lawful bases, but we just want to just look at them in a broad sense, right? We're not going to get too technical. So, as we heard before, when you're processing data, you need to ensure that you have one or more lawful bases for processing. And when you think about using AI and automation, it might be a little challenging to fit it into one of these categories. So let's just revise, let's just refresh our minds as to what these bases are. So you can get consent. So that's where, you know, somebody says, I, Justine Collins, consent to you processing my data in this purpose. It can be necessary for the performance of the contract. It can be compliance with a legal obligation. It could be something that is in the vital interest of the person, as well as public interest. It's for public use, that for exercise of a public authority. And then, of course, the legitimate interest, which is something that's a little challenging sometimes for controllers, grappling the balancing of the legitimate interests of the company weighed with the rights and freedoms of the individual. So we're just doing a broad refresher just for everybody's sake. So when we're looking at some of these AI developments and technological developments, it can pose a challenge for some of our fair processing obligations. Dr. Anglin spoke about the importance of your data protection statement or your privacy statement. So it's important that you're letting people know is this going to be is it going to be automated decision making? Are we using AI in our practices? It's very important because I know it sounds like, boy, you know, this is happening overseas and we don't need for business about that. But right here in Jamaica, there are places that use automation every day. HR departments that are using application tracking software, and they're using automation to, so the recommendation is, if you have your resumes and you don't have the keywords in the job, the vacancy notice is not going to pull it up. So the recommendation is, if you know you're applying as a data protection officer, make sure you put in this word and that word and that word and that word so that the system can pull it up. And that is an example of how even here in Jamaica, we are using it. It is real. It is every day. And so informed consent is important. Do you know, do your data subjects know, do your applicants know for a job that they will be subject to automated decision making? What's the level of human intervention? And explicit consent, I would recommend that you are saying, well, specifically when you're applying for this job, you need to know that, hey, there is an automated component in it. So I think that those are some of the things from the lawful basis point of view that you need to think about. Fair processing requires that transparency. So we definitely need to be thinking about that as technology develops. And so I refer to automated decision making. That is a specific right under Section 12. I know that words might be a little small on the screen. I hope you can see it. But there's a right under Section 12 which allows a controller or a company to ensure that no decision is made based solely on that automation, on that automated processing for the purpose of evaluating certain matters. So matters such as credit worthiness. There are also attendant rights involved, which involve the right to be informed of the logic behind that decision making. And so, oh, thank you. They're giving me I need to wrap it up, but that's fine. No, not wrap it up. 10 minutes. Okay, great. Yeah, man, I can't finish. All right, great. So guys, let's walk together. So it requires the controller to provide meaningful information. That is what we're getting from Article 29 Working Party, also known as the European Data Protection Board now. Meaningful information about the logic involved, and it should be sufficiently comprehensive. So if you give it to me and you say, you know, it looks like the code behind it, I'm going to be like, huh? I don't know what you're talking about, right? I need to understand what it involves. How do you go from X to Y in terms of making that decision meaningful to the layman, right? It must be able to. I know that Dr. Angle can probably read it, but I know that I wouldn't be able to read it. So every man should be able to understand what the system is doing, right? And not only that, there should be some sort of human oversight of that decision-making process. And it's not just, you just put in, okay, yeah, we're going to put in one little, you know, component of human intervention at the end. It needs to be meaningful, not a token gesture. That's the guidance that we're getting. And so when you are using AI and automation in your HR processes or whatever it is, you decide that, hey, you know, this is really, really cool. Let's test out this. And everybody's using ChatGPT now. Everybody. I was doing it at training at a school, and they're saying, yeah, man, we put everything in ChatGPT. All the teaching notes and this is that, we create it with ChatGPT. And I was like, well, make sure you're not putting students' information in there, you know? So very, very important. There's a recent case as well coming from the Court of Justice of the European Union, which clarifies really what this automated decision-making right involves. This was a case which involved a credit rating agency that had produced a sort of score similar to how our credit bureau works. And on the basis of that score, a borrower was refused financing. Now, the thing with that is that while that decision really looked at the fact that the credit rating agency's evaluation was something that was really heavily relied on by the lender in their ultimate decision. They wanted to say, no, you guys need to actually provide the logic, provide the decision-making process, the explanation to the borrower. She had objected. She said, look, can I understand why you made this decision? And they said, no, this is our IP. This is our trade secrets. We're not going to let you know. So certainly you're seeing at the international level heightened scrutiny where automation is being used, even if it's not the sole basis. And so we do need to be very, very careful as we pull for all of these new trendy things. And yeah, man, we're going to vet applicants in this way because we get hundreds of applications. We need to be mindful of how we're doing this and the data protection ramifications of it. We should be thinking about, there's a concept, and I think it's very closely related to what Dr. Anglin said about it being in the DNA of your organization. You want to have a data protection by design. So, you're designing all your systems and your operations to have data protection at the heart of it and by default. So that's the default. Privacy is the default. We are trying to preserve personal data as the default. And the last point, of course, is that transparency is critical to data protection. At the end of the day, what we're looking for is transparency. Okay, so recommendations and projections, which means I'm nearing the end. So what do we do? Compliance, well, maybe I should whisper it like Dr. Anglin, compliance. Compliance strategies, due diligence on your vendors is so important. I think a lot of times when people come to you about data protection, compliance, they said, oh, I need some consent. I think I need some consent, and that's the only thing they're concerned with. But you need to think about your processors, your third parties. Not only, consent is really important, but a lot of times you have a whole lot of processes that you're not thinking about, and you're not thinking about Section 30, which requires you to have sufficient contractual guarantees in place. Who are you interfacing with? You're sharing information. Just sending an email with personal data has an implication. So I know that there's some work in this space in terms of possibly getting certifications, data protection certifications for companies. So that could be something that is a good tool for assessing whether or not a vendor is compliant. So conducting data protection impact assessments, very, very important. If you're implementing a new solution or you have something that could affect persons, it presents a high risk to the rights and freedoms of persons, you need to be conducting a data protection impact assessment. It can be automated. And your privacy notice should accommodate data sharing practices as well as any automated decision making or any AI that you're using. Ensure your consent mechanism is comprehensive. Does it cover all the contemplated processing activities? Data minimization. It's a standard, but it's also a tool. Do we really need all of this information? Can we minimize how much we're collecting? Can we get it to a point even where we're retaining it for a certain period of time for tax purposes or FID? Can we just delete some of the information that may not be necessary at that time? So data minimization requires us to keep data that is adequate, relevant, and necessary for the purpose. When we retain it for a certain period of time, what data is relevant at that time? Contractual assurances, right? Very important. We touched on that before. And then, of course, another recommendation coming out of the EDPB is a mechanism for data subjects to check their profiles, a sort of right of access. How are they able to exercise this right of access? And quality assurance is very, very important. And of course, there should be a mechanism for human intervention where you're using automation or AI and an appeals process. So this is Data Privacy Week. Data Privacy Day will be on Sunday, great day. But what are we looking at beyond today? What's the landscape like? What can we expect moving forward? And I want to draw your attention to the fact that there are some developments internationally in terms of regulation of AI. There are some policy developments in the States, as well as the EU AI Act is going through several stages before it is passed. But aside from that, the broader international regulatory discussions, even at a local level, we can be looking at data privacy as something that is just good for our organizations. I liked when you spoke about the competitive edge, because there is a school of thought that says, should data privacy disclosures be something that's part of our broader ESG, or environment, social, and governance disclosures? Should we be thinking about companies' commitment to data protection and to preserving persons' privacy as something that you should do? It's a good corporate citizen, you know? I'm committed to, you know, that when you bank with us, or when you transact with us, your personal data will be relatively safe, right? And it's a good thing. I would be like, this is great. I'd love to bank with you, or I'd love to transact with you. I went to a doctor the other day, and the doctor said, could you sign our data protection consent? And it really made my day. I was like, I think I'll come back next week. I wonder if I'll be sick next week. I was like, I felt very, very comforted to know that my doctor felt like she needed to be data protection compliant, and she said she walked me through it. And I was like, I'm going to recommend you to others. And it made a client or a patient for life for me. So it certainly, I think, can be put in that broader context. And then listed companies. We know that in the States, the SEC has recently started requiring cybersecurity disclosure, cybersecurity risks as part of listed companies in the States. They need to be saying to the market, these are the things that may happen, a data breach or whatever happens at a particular point, and that's part of their ongoing disclosure. Could that be something that is considered, you know? As a listed company, this is something that could affect you operationally, right? If you have a cybersecurity incident. And then just a bit more academic, there are two concepts. Data trust, so one of the things that we're looking at on a broader level is, from a legal standpoint, is the problem with some of the data protection compliance is that you have a situation where you may not be able to access your data and exercise the level of control. So data trusts are frameworks or legal agreements between a steward of data, like a data steward, that ensures a level of, okay, if you have an issue, you can reach out to the steward of that data trust, which is contractually agreed, and be able to exercise certain rights. And so they have a sort of what we call in law fiduciary duty, a duty of care, in a sense, to these subjects to be able to say, okay, yes, your data was breached, and this is the recourse that you have. So it enables a level of trust, and it's something that they're looking at a broader level. And then there's also a lot of work going on in researching whether or not personal data can be property. Can there be property rights that accrue to data? So in the same way, I have some land, and you're able to say, look, this is my land, this is my data, right? So I want to end on that note. I want to end on the note that your data hopefully will be your property, but you can view it in that way, right? We need to be in a position where we are actively thinking about our data as property. What are persons, what are entities doing with our data? How are they accountable for our data? What kind of systems do you have in place? What does your notice look like? You could start from there. Have you looked at the privacy policy of Instagram before you put up that picture? No? Right, so can start from there, just being a bit more privacy literate and looking at the consents and looking at the cookies and just familiarizing yourself with that. And with that, I thank you very much.
You know, as I was listening to Ms. Collins, I was seeing how what she was saying intersected with some of what Dr. Anglin came and spoke about, like data quality and data minimization. Those sound kind of similar to me. And how individual participation, allowing us to be a part of how our data is managed, also came up. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what comes next. And I also wanted to point out her angle on AI, which is, it's still relatively new. I remember my first introduction to AI was this 1999 movie where this couple adopted a robot and the robot became sentient. And for me, it was scary. It was something out of science fiction. And now to see how it's unfolding and becoming a part of our day-to-day, it's a little less scary and a lot more interesting to see. So we are winding down, and we're going to get ready to go into our third and final presentation. Now, when you're traveling, you create like an itinerary. Maybe you're not traveling overseas, but you're going to the supermarket, and you know it's 5 o'clock, and you know everybody's trying to go home at 5 o'clock, so you plan your route. In a similar way that we chart our course, organizations today must also chart their course in the digital landscape. CEO and founder of Design Privacy, Chukwuemeka Cameron, is here to welcome us to a roadmap where innovation meets implementation and success is the destination. He is a distinguished alumnus of Erasmus University, Rotterdam, and he holds a master's in information technology and management and law. During his academic tenure, Cameron demonstrated leadership as the president of the master's student body, showcasing not only his academic prowess, but also his commitment to fostering a vibrant academic community. His areas of expertise encompass a diverse range of disciplines within the master's program, including privacy, information technology management, and intellectual property. Mr. Cameron's multidisciplinary approach reflects his dynamic understanding of the intersections between technology, law, and management. Please turn your attention to our final presenter for the morning, Mr. Chukwuemeka Cameron, who will be presenting on the topic Data Processing Strategies, a Roadmap for Digital Transformation.
Good day to all. Let me thank the Commissioner for having me here and say good afternoon to Ms. Joaquin Murray and our gracious host, Mr. Anglin, on behalf of the University of the West Indies. It is always a pleasure to stand before you, an audience, and also a pleasure to listen to Justine. I always learn something new from her. And I'm going to be transparent and open and say that I think it's unfair to speak after the privacy practitioner, speak after the lawyer, and then speak about digital transformation in front of the person who wrote the book on digital transformation, the chairman. I think you'd agree that that's unfair. But notwithstanding that, I am going to segue my presentation based on some of the last issues that Justine raised when she was speaking about SCG and disclosure obligations of publicly listed companies in the context of digital transformation and how the Data Protection Act can serve as a roadmap to your digital transformation strategy. What is the relationship between SCG, say it again? The SCG, the governance one, right, the SCG and data minimization and a digital strategy to digital transformation. Where do those cross over in real terms? Because SCG is a new concept. I'm still trying to say the letters in order. Oh, is it? I tell you that. I'm telling you, I'm open and transparent. ESG, the environment, social, and governance. How can data protection be a strategy to allow you to stand out and adopt those ESG principles? Let's start with the environment. What is one of the biggest threats to our environment today that is driving, what are one of the biggest drivers of the whole environmental issue? To my mind, it is a consumption of energy and the type of energy we consume. Do we know what are the biggest consumers of energy? It is really driven by these large language models that you heard Justine speaking of, that are hosted in these data centers. So people are, I don't know if it has happened as yet, but just to manage the energy costs, people are thinking about, or have, I don't know if it happened, but building data centers under the ocean. It started up, Chris? Okay, good. He wrote the book on digital transformation. So just to reduce energy costs, because that's the biggest cost in driving this digital world that we live in, is the consumption of energy. If you were to try and operate a data center to drive a large language model in Kingston, it would take down our public grid. That's the real impact of the digital world in which we live. It would, and when I say take down our public grid, we get power cut. That's what I mean. It has happened, and it continues to happen. That's why people are looking to go to Alaska to have natural cooling instead of having to use energy to cool these servers that are driving the processing of this data. That is why we're looking to build these data centers under the sea to manage energy cost, to keep the servers cool that are doing all of this work to facilitate this digital world in which we now live. So, what does that have to do with data protection? Let's look at this. We heard about the concept of data minimization. Professor Anglin asked a question and gave an answer to it that I didn't agree to. The question that he asked earlier was, when you're speaking about, we took it for granted that with the PEP principles, that we're supposed to minimize data. Yes, only collect the information you need. And that's natural, isn't it? Don't we get that? No, that's not natural. That's contrary to how businesses operate. That's contrary to human nature. As a business, we collect as much information as possible. Why? Because we may need it. Why? Because we have AI, because we have machine learning. Those needs large data sets to be able to analyze and derive actionable information. So it's an imperative to collect these large data sets. And even if it's not for that reason, why? Because we always did. And I just, that's my natural disposition. We want more. What processes these large data sets? Servers that consume energy that can take down our grid. If it is, we were to implement Not because it's a nice principle. That doesn't work. There is no incentive for us to adopt that principle of data minimization. You have to have a law to tell people, no, you cannot collect it unless justified. And this is not legal. It's a fact. There's an imperative to collect it without any justification. So to minimize that, you have to say, no, you have to justify why you are collecting it. Let me bring that home with the final piece now. If it's the servers that are processing these large data sets, and you minimize the amount of data that you're collecting, you're actually reducing the cost of energy. A very direct relationship with maintaining our national grid and implementing data protection principles. So that one may have maybe a new concept, but when I'm put in an unfair position, I usually like to rise to the challenge. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to what I had in mind. And this is me hedging against the book, the person who wrote the book on digital transformation, because I can't appear to speak to with any authority on the issue in front of him. So I'm going to take it from a different angle, because I never read his book, because he has not provided me with a copy of the book as yet. So what do we think of when we speak about digital transformation? Digital transformation is not AI. That's not digital transformation. If we were to go back, and I'm inspired by this book written by Professor Harari, Sapiens and Philosophy, if we go back into a room like this, well, not a room like this, but with numbers of persons, the same amount of people like this, living in a cave because we're afraid to go outside, because we cannot protect ourselves. We can't keep ourselves warm. We can't protect ourselves against all the threats that are outside in terms of animals that want to eat us. That is what society is. The technologies available back then were stones. That was technology that enhanced our ability to protect ourselves. So I'm not going to go through the transition from then to now. What I want us to appreciate is the whole concept of what technology, what transformation is, and where we're coming from. Thank you very much. And so I'm going back way back into history, so she frightened, so she quickly gave me the time limit. But I'm fast forwarding to the future. If we jump to today, from where we were then to where we are now, how do we fast track digital transformation? Because when you look, the speed, the amount of time, the centuries that we moved from the Ice Age, Stone Age, and all the different ages to where we are today, where we cannot keep pace with all the disruptions. We keep on hearing about disruptions, and we don't know what's happening. How, as a company that has to make money today, that is compelled to be competitive, to stay alive, how do we do so? How can we use the Data Protection Act as a tool to remain and become competitive? Let's start at the national level. Unfortunately for the government, it wasn't a how do we employ data protection to help our digital transformation. Our Chief Justice Brian Sykes said, if you wanted to have any digital transformation, you have to have a robust data protection framework. Full stop. It was very easy. It was very easy for them. And what I don't know if I've said that too fast. So the government of Jamaica, for various reasons, wanted to transform our society digitally. However, you and I all said, we're not upon that with you. The tool that they were using was one of the primary tools was the implementation of NIDS. But we said, no, not on your Aunt Nelly. I'm not giving you my information. The government, and as such, the opposition of the day took the government to court and said, you're breaching the people and privacy. And our Chief Justice went further than what the opposition wanted. He struck down the entire bill, and he said, no data protection, no digital transformation. So, on a macro level, there could not be that sort of national acceleration for digital transformation without the Data Protection Act and a robust data protection framework. How does that now trickle down to you, the person that has a big business or a small business? The first thing, and if we say digital transformation is managing your company easier using technology, interacting with your stakeholders easier and maximizing your profits, let us accept that that's the definition for digital transformation. Please, Mr. Chairman, just for the purposes of this discussion, nothing more. The first thing any Mr. Record would tell you that you have to do, you have to know your existing processes. You have to know your existing business processes. You have to know what data you're processing. Those are the basics. In order to comply with the Data Protection Act and in order to register with the Office of the Information Commissioner, that the law said ought to have happened by December 1 last year, and this is not fear-mongering, the law says if you're operating without registering, you're exposed to criminal liability. What do you have to do? She wants you to tell you, she wants you to take an inventory of the personal data you have in your organization. I ask you, if you're going to undergo digital transformation, don't you going to think you're going to need to know the data you have in your organization? At least I see some heads nodding. Yes. That's the first thing I'm asking you to do. Take an inventory of the personal data that you have. Then they want you to ask, they're asking you, okay, why do you have it? If we say gold data is the new oil, and this information is a critical asset in your business, and it plays such an important role for digital transformation, if them ask you why you have it, is that unreasonable? Is your business? Is your business? If you're trading money, you need to know how much money you have and where you get it and why you have it. Okay. So they also want you to share with them, tell them who you're sharing this personal data with. So we're speaking about international transfers, local transfers, sharing data. Privacy is irrelevant outside of the concept of sharing data. If you're not sharing it with anybody, it's not exposed to anybody. So the essence of privacy, in the context of data protection, is to facilitate the sharing of information between parties. So you have a business, you must interact with external stakeholders. It's incumbent upon you to know who you're doing business with. If you are going to transform your organization digitally, these are things I would posit or suggest to you that you would have to know. So the legislation is not asking you to go outside of what is in your best interest. Too often, as businesses in Jamaica, we like to hustle and make a money and turn a dime, and it does allow for our resilience, our innovation. But if we want to build robust, scalable organizations, you must know what you have in your organization. You must hold yourself accountable. So for those persons who cannot afford someone for that to conduct that digital transformation, and on top of that, you are now asked to become compliant, I would say go with the easier part, because if you're going to do the digital transformation thing, you are going to need a consultant, and he's going to map out a roadmap for you. Why don't you take up the data processing standards and follow that as your roadmap? You have to start from somewhere. The Data Protection Act tells you what to do. So before I get that final signal, I will leave that. I'm going to go back out to the macro. The GDPR is the driver for digital transformation in Europe. That is the purpose for the GDPR. The cost of doing business between countries was too expensive as a result of the 1995 directive that required all countries to have privacy laws in place. So what Europe said, hey, we now live in a digital world. Business and value is generated by the sharing of data across countries. We need to accelerate our digital economy. We need to make it easier for ourselves to share information while respecting the autonomy and dignity of individuals, and thus the GDPR. Let us not view GDPR and our Data Protection Act as that onerous tool or onerous obligation that, rest assured, will get you in trouble. And when you look at when the Information Commissioner is not smiling in this comfortable space, if you were to see her in other settings where she's asked specific questions, you will understand you are exposed, and it is real. I'm going to invite everybody in front of me and online, use the Data Protection Act as your roadmap to digital transformation if it is you don't know where to start. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Wow. All right. And that wraps up the presentations that we have had the privilege of being a part of here at the Data Privacy Conference. So ably, you were able to come to us and urge us to consider ways that we can use the resources that we have on hand to chart our next steps in this digital landscape. Thank you so much, Mr. Cameron. And also, let's just give another round of applause for all of our presenters one more time. I'm certain we have been empowered to use the data processing strategies that we have to maintain data privacy in our organizations and in our day-to-day experiences. But I'm not tasked with giving all of these thanks. So at this time, I'm going to invite Deputy Information Commissioner at the Office of the Information Commissioner, Mr. David Gray, to move the vote of thanks.
And I thank you, Janelle. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude today's enlightening journey through the realm of data privacy, it is my distinct honor to extend heartfelt gratitude on behalf of the organizers of today's event. First and foremost, our sincere appreciation goes to our esteemed collaborators, the UE Data Protection Office, and Privacy and Legal Management Consultants Limited, whose partnership paved the way for this insightful event. Special thanks also to the University of the West Indies for accommodating this event here at their regional headquarters. Thank you, sir. A round of applause is also due to our gracious host, our Kingston and St. Andrew Festival Queen for 2023, Miss Janelle Powell, for her embodiment of grace and vibrancy as she skillfully moderated the program. We extend our gratitude to the talented performers, Agape, Hanif Lalo, and our final one, Mr. Tafani Bouchekab, for their beautiful renditions that have added an harmonious touch to our gathering. Special acknowledgement is also reserved for Ms. Joaquin Murray, our Chief Technical Director of the Office of the Prime Minister, in charge of our Information and Communications Technology Division, who conveyed remarks on behalf of our Minister, Senator Dr. Dana Morris Dixon. We also extend our heartfelt thanks to specially invited guests for gracing us with their presence. We raise our hat also to Ms. Abigail Hall, whose creative touch transformed our event space into a visual delight. Recognition is also due to JIS, Ms. Rashida Barkley, Ms. Maxine Schroeder, Sarnia Hilton Booth, Justine Harrison, Stephen McEwen, and the JIS and UE production teams respectively for their behind-the-scenes effort that have made this event a success. A hearty thank you to Ms. Jeanette Hutchinson and her team at Cuisine Art for providing our refreshments for today's events. We express our appreciation to our media partners who bridge the physical and virtual realms, ensuring that this conference reached a wider international audience. Our gratitude extends to our presenters. Dr. Anglin, Ms. Justine Collins, Mr. Chukwemeka Cameron, whose insights have enriched our understanding of the data privacy challenges and how we can navigate them for society's betterment. A green thumbs up to Plantaholic for the thoughtful gifts that we're about to hand over as a token of gratitude to our presenters. And at this time, I'm going to invite our Information Commissioner, Ms. Celia Barkley, to present these tokens to our esteemed presenters. And then I shall call the presenters individually. Ms. Barkley will present firstly to Dr. Anglin. Dr. Anglin, can you come forward? Ms. Collins. Chuck Cameron. And let's give them a round of applause. Lastly, a resounding thank you to the management and the staff of the OIC, with special recognition to our event coordinator, Ms. Khadija Brand. To our specially invited guests, whether here in person or joining us virtually on YouTube at the Office of the Information Commissioner and the Jamaica Information Service, Your presence has made this conference a success. Let us continue navigating the challenges of data privacy together in this connected world, while ensuring our continued commitment to maintaining data privacy. I thank you.
I don't know if any of you have checked the stream or had the opportunity to see what's going on in the live chat, but we have a very active community down there, so thank you for acknowledging. I'm going to call a few names from the chat just to say thank you for being here, thank you for engaging and giving us some food for thought. I see James Coons, he's a self-proclaimed data privacy nerd, and he's been giving us a lot of commentary throughout the presentations. I also see Adelia Gardine. Thank you for joining us. And one more shout out to Dr. Carol Blanchard for being a part of what we have shared today. I saw somebody comment and say, something like this should have every citizen in Jamaica tuned in, and I agree. So I'm sure, I'm banking on them specifically to share the link as we are able to tune in anytime that we're ready to learn more and cement what we've learned here in our brains. This conference, held in observance of Data Privacy Week, has indeed been a beacon of knowledge, especially for me. I'm no expert in data privacy, but this has been enlightening. And it's a testament to the collective commitment to safeguarding privacy in our interconnected age across all landscapes. As we leave with newfound insights, may we carry forward the torch of awareness, the torch of actionable strategies to continue navigating this evolving landscape of data privacy. Remember to follow us on our social media pages. I'm going to plug it. So we're going to start off with the UE Data Protection Office. Stay up to date with the latest on their Facebook at University Data Protection Office, on Instagram at University DPO. Then, for Privacy and Legal Management Consultants Limited, their Instagram is at PLMC Jamaica on Instagram, LinkedIn at Privacy and Legal Management Consultants Limited, and of course, the OIC at LinkedIn, on LinkedIn at Office of the Information Commissioner, Instagram, Facebook, and X, or Twitter as some of us know it, at the OICJM, that is our handle, and on YouTube at Office of the Information Commissioner, Jamaica. Thank you all for being an integral part of this significant journey. And until we meet again, I also want to thank JNN. JNN, thank you so much for broadcasting this live to our viewing audience. We really do appreciate it. Until we meet again, let's remain vigilant, proactive in championing privacy rights. Now, to close us out, I will invite Tafani Bushikab to perform the medley, My Dream. I'm your host, Janelle Powell. Have a good one.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once more for being with us today. Before you go, we do have refreshments for you on the outside.